Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the seminar, Immigration. We're going to talk you through the changes to the Employer-Assisted Temporary Work Visa system. Just before we get started, I thought I would just point out that you've probably noticed a few cameras and camera crew at the back of the room. So the reason for that is this event has actually been live streamed. So we've got around 1,500 other people online streaming this in from all around the country. Those for people who are unable to get to one of the live events. In fact, we've got people from all around the world here. So welcome to you all. So we will refer to you as the live audience, and we'll refer to our online audience as the online audience. Just a couple of housekeeping matters for the live audience. If you haven't noticed already, bathrooms are to the left, just out the door and hook a left, and at the end of the hall. And from an evacuation point of view, if there is one required, again, out the door you came in, and we just mingle over on the grass sort of area that is away to the left. The seminar is scheduled for 90 minutes. The content that we'll deliver is going to be 60-ish, and that should leave plenty of time at the end for questions. You will get a copy of the slide deck sent to your email, and for the online audience, the same applies to you. And along with that, a short survey we ask you to just fill in and let us know what you thought about how these all work. We're very fortunate that we have Sian Roguski, who's going to actually take you through the content. And I say fortunate, but Sian heads up manages the immigration policy team. So she has worked, or her and her team have worked fearlessly over the last wee while. I'll have Sian can talk you through this in a little bit more detail, but Sian works very closely with the government and what objectives they're trying to achieve through immigration policy, and obviously with the market through consultation with employers. So quite a balancing act from her perspective. But the great thing about having Sian do the presentation today is A, you'll get the information you need and how it impacts on your business, but also you'll get a lot of context around why we've come to these policy decisions. In regard to questions, Sian gets in a real flow, so we don't want to disrupt that. So when it comes to questions, if you can just hold off to the very end, often questions that are asked on the way through the information comes up later in the presentation anyway. So there is plenty of time at the end for your questions to the live audience. For our online audience, slightly different. We've got a team of experts sitting back in our head office who will be able to respond to any questions that they want to tap away on their keyboards. So you can check in with that team, just say hi if you like, but they should be up and ready now. Obviously, there's 1,500 or so of you, so there's only a few of them, so just be patient when it comes to responses. All right, so Sian, the floor is yours.
Excellent.
Welcome.
That sound seems to be okay, yeah? And you've got to love a dress with pockets, the women out there. Okay, so I'm just going to tuck this away. So tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Sian Roguski aho. As Dean mentioned, my name is Sian Roguski. I manage the immigration policy team at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, and it is my great pleasure to be here because, as he mentioned, my team, we've been living and breathing this for the last couple of years. So we've been working with the government when they came in to develop a set of policies. But just to give you a flavour of what we do, I've got responsibility for policy settings across the whole of the immigration system. So essentially, if it's about a non-New Zealand citizen crossing a border, we're interested in making policy settings around that. So for the last couple of years, it's been a really busy time for us. We've been doing everything. I'll talk to you in detail about this work. We advise on the end-to-end immigration process from selection, attraction, settlement, right through to border settings and meeting our international obligations under international instruments. So that's had us leading work and advising on things like the increase to the refugee quota, the introduction of the Electronic Travel Authority, things like the parent policy, other residence policies, and this, our wee baby, changes and reforms to the temporary work visa system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the set of slides. It's sort of in two different main areas. I'm going to start off with a bit of the context that Dean mentioned. Why is the government doing this? What kinds of outcomes are they seeking to achieve? How has that structured the set of decisions that they're taking and the further design that we'll be doing over the next sort of year and a half? So I'll do that. And then the second thing is I'm going to take you into some deep dives about actually what this new system is and how it works. I'm going to particularly take you through to a dive around the new employee accreditation standards that'll be coming in. And I'm also going to take you through in a bit more detail as well around this thing that we call the job check. It's a little bit jargony at the moment, but it all kind of makes sense, I hope, and explained along the way. Now, I promise you, I am going to give you as much detail as I can on this because I know that is top of your minds as employers. There is a caveat that comes along with that because, and you'll see with the implementation timeframes, we are still doing some of the more detailed design around it. So I'm giving you as much information I can. I will be honest, if you ask a question about something detailed, we may not have the answer to that, all right? So this is the start of a conversation with us, with immigration, with you as employers and other users of the system to make sure you understand kind of what's coming up. So I thought maybe just before I kind of kick on, I'd just kind of take you back about a couple of years. So when the government did come in, one of the things they said, we would like some advice around how we can make our immigration system, which to be honest feels a bit sort of one-size-fits-all-ish, into something that actually can better respond to the needs of particular sectors or the needs of regions. How can we make it, how can we sort of distinguish that? So, you know, as public servants, we responded to that challenge, provided some advice. Welcome, come on in. And as we did that, we could also reflect the things that we had heard from you as an employers around how you use the system, your pain points. A lot of really rich information from operational colleagues in Immigration New Zealand about what it's like for them to run and work this system. And that actually sort of broadened out, and the government said, yes, actually, we might be up for a bit more of a fundamental change. So rather than doing the tinkering of the edges, is there a way for us to think about just how we do this differently? So that led off to a set of proposals that were released by the government in December of last year. They asked us to do the consultation on their behalf. So in March, that consultation finished and we got over 950 responses. So thank you very much if you provided input into that. A lot of great stuff came back that we then took on board and provided further advice. And then we land into this space. So back in September, the Minister of Immigration announcing the set of reforms. So that's a little bit about where we've been. All right, so back to those outcomes. What fundamentally is the government seeking to achieve through this set of changes? Well, this little colourful diagram kind of sets it out. 6 different outcomes. I'm going to take you through them. So the first one I've got there in the top blue, ensuring that temporary workers are only recruited for genuine shortages. We are in a very particular labour market at the moment, near to being record low unemployment. We know that there's always going to be a role for migrant workers in our workforce. And when we think about this in terms of policy terms, we divide those shortages into 2 different types. Often we talk about skills shortages, and then the other kind of type, equally important, are labour shortages. So skills shortages, recognising that actually it takes quite a long time for some occupations to be trained up and filled by New Zealanders. You know, in some of our occupations, it takes 7+ years to train someone up. So we know at any one time, we're actually going to need people from outside to come in. There are spillover benefits for firms we see when those people come in, training and upskilling other New Zealanders. Skills shortages. It takes a long time to grow. Systems can be slow to move and invest. Labour shortages, equally important, but these are jobs typically that we see don't quite take as much time to train people up. Equally as important, because when I'm talking about, you know, talking to a kiwi fruit farmer in the agriculture sector, they say, we need someone right now to pick the fruit off the trees, because otherwise that fruit is rotting and that is lost revenue. So obviously a need to fill those shortages as well. We want to make sure that they are genuine shortages. The second is, and this is the kind of tightrope balancing act. At the same time, we want to make sure that the incentives are in there for employers to train and upskill New Zealanders where they're available, right? And this is the balancing act. Because what we see when we look at data and looking across countries is that a steady flow of migrant workers potentially has the impact of decreasing those incentives on employers, because migrants might be more attractive, potentially increases the risk that wages and conditions in a particular sector or a set of occupations can come down as well. So that's our constant balancing act. Welcome. In the light blue there, I've got create better connections between the immigration, the education and skills, and the welfare systems. Now, the reason that those three come together is because essentially those are the different systems that produce the labour market that we draw on in New Zealand, whether it's through a domestic worker or through a migrant worker. And one of the things that we have seen is actually our immigration system kind of operates out here by itself and doesn't really hardwire links into those other systems. So to give you an example, our skills shortages list that we've been running for a number of years and you're probably familiar with, when an occupation gets put on that list, it does nothing to send a signal to our education system, tertiary, secondary, that this is a shortage and that we should be looking to gear investment to those areas. So really, success out of this system is hardwiring those connections in. And if you've got those three working at the top, you essentially have that red box happening, which is that you, as employers, get the workers you need, skills shortages, labour shortages, and you're accessing that from both immigration, imported labour, but also from the domestic supply as well. In the purple box there, I've got reduce exploitation of temporary workers. Now, generally, I'm pretty much guaranteed whenever I'm doing these presentations and talking directly to employers, they tend not to be the folk in this camp. And it is a sad fact, unfortunately, that in New Zealand, we do have employers who will look to exploit their workers, New Zealand workers, but migrant workers with particular vulnerabilities as well. And in our immigration system, believe it or not, we actually have very few tools and levers to screen those employers out. We want to screen them out because obviously exploitation is bad for the worker, but it's actually bad for employers as well because employers are finding themselves on an uneven playing field, competing with other employers who aren't paying the right amount, who cash for jobs. How do you compete with that if you're a good employer and actually paying proper wages and conditions? We want to screen them out. There's more to be said about this, and at the moment the government is consulting on a wider set of changes around combating migrant exploitation. I'll take an opportunity perhaps just to touch on that at the end, but a real theme for this particular government taking action there. And then I keep meaning to sort of make the bottom one in neon actually. I've got there, make the system easier to navigate. It's one of my personal faves. Because in the system, can you believe it, that there are currently 6 different visa categories or pathways that essentially end up with a visa being issued for an employer-assisted work visa? 6. Okay, so what we're going to do is bring that down to 1, and that's what the set of reforms does. But we also took the opportunity that while we're doing that, looking at where the heck do we just do processing where we don't need to do processing? Where do we see this constant swirl, this to and fro? So when I think about that, and it does unpack into 3 different things. The first very much is about taking out unnecessary processing steps. So I'm talking about processing steps that don't really end up changing the decision about whether a visa is issued, doesn't really end up changing an outcome for a New Zealand worker, for example, when we do the check with MSD, that just ends up being loaded into processing costs that at the end of the day, people have to pay through a fee, taking out unnecessary processing costs where they don't add. The second thing, particularly for migrants, is about making their pathways clearer. When people are making a decision to come to New Zealand, perhaps for 3 years, they might be thinking about bringing their family with them, they need to know from the outset what is the likelihood that their role, their job, might have a pathway to residence so they can make good choices, but also you as employers know where you stand, that if you want this migrant to kind of have that pathway, what is it that you might be needing to offer in terms of the job? So making those pathways clearer. The last thing to unpack from that is it's actually quite a fundamental change because when we looked at the system, we asked the question of, actually who is the customer at the end of the day? And at the moment, our whole entire immigration system is set up as a migrant being the applicant, a migrant being the customer. And when we looked at this set of visas, we thought, well, actually, it all originates from the point of an employer having a vacancy. An employer want to fill that vacancy, can't find a New Zealander, so looks to fill that with a migrant. So perhaps actually the employer is a customer of the system in a way that we don't recognise yet. And so when you start to bring in that mindset, you begin to think quite differently about how you orient the system. And with an employer as a customer, it brings out questions like, how do we provide a service to you that meets how you work and meets your needs? I will tell you more about that. All right, so that's my context for you. Right, where are we? Okay, so you would have heard about these announcements. You will no doubt be thinking, oh my God, what's happening? What's happening when? There is one key message I want you guys to take away. Nothing yet, okay? There is nothing you need to do differently right now. These changes are going to be phased in 3 tranches, okay? And I'm going to be going through this in detail, but this is the diagram which kind of sets our pathway. First phase, there is actually one change that has been implemented. It was implemented back in October, and generally it's quite useful for me to get a bit of a flavour of those in the room. Sorry, online audience. How many of you here are currently accredited employers under the policy that we have now? Ooh, heaps of you. Okay, cool. So there is a change. Will affect you for migrants that you're going to be employing in the future, but I'll tell you more. So that is the first tranche that has happened. Then you'll see we've got a range of changes that are going to be happening in mid-2020. Mid-2020 means July 2020. That's what we're planning for. Talk to you about those in detail. And then finally, in 2021, we'll be popping the courts because actually that is when this whole system will be stood up. And I'll tell you a little bit about what that's going to look like as well. But nothing that you need to do differently right now. Perhaps just a bit of thinking with the information that you get from the seminar, thinking and planning, thinking about your business and how this will come in, but nothing specifically. Okay, so let me take you through in that more detail. Now just see, 2019, so this is the change that has happened. So those of you who are accredited employers, no doubt you'll be well aware that a policy exists where your worker can be issued with a work to residence temporary visa, and they needed to satisfy a salary threshold of $55,000 in order to qualify that. And providing they kept that salary throughout, in 2 years' time they'd have work for residence. Now, that policy is changing, but any of your workers who are currently in that space, nothing has changed for them. They will continue on their visa. Providing they meet that 55,000 threshold, they will qualify for that at the end of the day. But if you are looking to bring in new workers from the 7th of October, they will be subject to a higher salary rate. Let me give you a bit of context about why that changed, because we hear, why has it gone up by so much, and why did you do it so fast? So a few points on that. So this is a policy that 55,000 threshold dates to about 2008. We are in 2019, and when that $55,000 threshold was set, that was reflective of a role that was an exceptional skill, that it was a highly paid role. And that salary threshold was not indexed. So quite frankly, it just doesn't match a salary of that kind of job to today. It's an important policy, this work to residence policy, because the other option, of course, for those of you familiar, is the skilled migrant category. But I'd say there was a safety valve in this policy, and it's how I describe it about thinking about how square pegs fit in round holes. Because in skilled migrant category, you collect points and you can apply for residency across a range of factors like your age, your qualification, your income. And what we were finding in that policy is actually there were some really high-flying occupations and people that would tend to fail on that set of tests, particularly because of the qualification element. And if I give you an example, I'm thinking of like WYSI IT specialists, a number of people of whom we employ in Wellington. We're actually, how we monitor qualifications and the evolution of qualifications, we have no hope of keeping up with in the immigration system. So this was a policy to enable them to fit in. But at $55,000, it's not reflective of those kind of jobs. And so what that has shifted up to is just shy of 80,000, which is 150% of the median wage, more reflective of a higher paid of that kind of role. And there is some equalisation there to our skilled migrant category. So being able to recognise the kind of people that might just get picked at the post through SMC, but still have a mechanism for coming through. This is a policy which will be disestablished in 2021, but we will still have a work to residence policy through this set of changes, okay? So you can still bring people in through this. If they're employed after the 7th of October, they will need to meet that higher salary threshold, and I'll tell you about what's going to happen from 2021 when I get to that bit. Okay. Aha, so this is the first of our set of changes that are coming in mid-2020, so that's July 2020. We do have a current policy that's been in place since 2017, which meant that lower skilled, which is a particular definition, a lower skilled worker would not be able to support their partner or any dependent children if they had them on their visa. Government has decided to reinstate the ability for those workers to be able to do that. So from July 2020, providing, so for workers who are earning under the median, they will be able to support a partner, they will be able to support a dependent child, okay? Essentially what that means is that for their child, they're issued a student visa. They are treated like a domestic student in our primary and secondary schooling. So essentially that's a free education for them. When they hit tertiary, they are treated as international students. They will need to pay international students fees. That's no different than currently we have. And if they're a preschooler, they don't attract the government subsidy for early childhood education. What hasn't changed at all is if people are earning above the median, they've always been able to support their partner and worker and bring that in. There is one thing I should mention. It's been our existing policy since year dot, but that in order for someone, a worker, to support their partner or child, they do need to meet a minimum income, and that's $43,000 currently. That's a setting that we bring in from the welfare system, because essentially we look to see what the sort of commensurate benefits are that New Zealanders would have and go, actually, we recognise that in New Zealand, you need this income in order to support a family. If you don't, benefit system kicks in, we import that into the immigration system as well. So they do need to be earning a minimum income that is indexed, it moves with whatever changes happen in the benefit system. And that's been something that's been in place for a while. Okay, what else? Again, there's a lot of personal favourites in here. One of my big personal favourites is from July 2020, ANZCO gone. ANZCO will bear no impact on immigration decision-making for employer-assisted temporary work visas. Okay? Currently, we are working in a system that uses both ANZCO classification, Australia and New Zealand standard classification of occupations, and income. And with a mix of those, it splits people into three groups: higher skilled, mid-skilled, lower skilled. Probably unsurprisingly, what it means is a lot of discussion to and fro between employers and Immigration New Zealand, haggling over which ANZCO classification is what. And to be honest, this is kind of at the heart of some of that unnecessary processing. So the government has decided from July 2020 to move to a much simpler salary threshold. The salary threshold will be set at the national median, and so a job will either pay above it or below it. We will still want to collect that ANZCO information from you because it's so important for people like me that need to form advice and monitor and see what's happening in the system. But it will not bear any, it will not have any bearing on the decision making. Your job will either be above the median or below the median. Now, currently, the median is around about 52, it's just gone up actually, 52 to 54,000 salary. Or if you break that down into an hourly rate, around $25.50. So clearly set at that, your job is either above or your job is below. ANZCO will not play any role in that. Now, I do like my colleagues at Statistics New Zealand and the Australian Statistics Bureau. So MB and Immigration New Zealand does not own ANZCO. As much as we all hate it, We are not able to change it. That is jointly owned by our Statistics New Zealand and also the Australian Bureau. And we have been talking with them for many, many years about would they review the ANZSCO system, because we know, you've been telling us, there are new roles, new occupations that have been created that are currently not in ANZSCO. We know that a number of roles in ANZSCO have increased the qualifications and become higher skilled. And so we've been talking to them for a while about doing that refresh, and they weren't in a position to do it because it meant that New Zealand had to agree with Australia, and that wasn't happening. But then, to all of our surprise, actually, they did do a little bit of a refresh. And what they did, their refresh centred on the existing occupations that are in ANZSCO and looking at seeing whether or not any of those had increased their skill level. So particularly looking at ANZSCO 4 to 5 and seeing whether or not they were moving up to ANZSCO 1, 2 and 3. There are some occupations which have moved from 4 to 5 to 1, 2 and 3. More information on the immigration website, so you can go in and have a little look to see if that's any occupations that you employ into. So that was great. We're like, well, yay, they have done a refresh and we have been asking for it a while. Slightly awkward because we're moving away from ANZSCO come July. So what the government has decided to make sure that no one is worse off in the interim, if the job has moved from a 4 to 5 to a 1, 2 or 3, and that job pays above the median, that job will be treated as a higher skilled job. So that enables us to kind of look through, given that we're getting rid of ANZSCO, if it was one of those jobs being paid above the median, we'll bring it through so no one is worse off. So do have a look at the immigration website just to see if that's any of yours. All right. Overview of the changes. Now, I love this diagram because I've been living and breathing this literally for the last 2 years. And when I put it up, people are like, what the heck is that? This is my little roadmap, and it's what I'm going to use to take you through exactly how the new system will work. But one of the things, a couple of things that I just want to say up front. So I'm going to be talking a lot about employer-assisted temporary work visas. Okay? Because it's that set of visas that these reforms apply to. You may, in your businesses, be employing people on working holiday schemes. For the REC, the recognised seasonal employers out there, you may be bringing in workers on them. You might be hiring students. You may be hiring partners of workers who have open work rights. All of those visas are outside the scope of this set of changes. So I'm going to remember as best I can to use that word employer-assisted temporary work visa, which doesn't really roll off the tongue. But I'll do my best because I just want to remind you of the scope, that this is the set of visas I'm talking about. Okay, so my little roadmap. And the why. Why are we doing this roadmap? Well, just let me give you a little bit more context again, because in the set of work visas, the government has looked to put the settings to manage two kinds of risks that we could see could eventuate when you bring someone in on one of these visas. The first is what we call a regulatory risk. So this is that risk that someone comes in, migrant workers, particularly at lower incomes, quite vulnerable, and that an employer could potentially exploit them. Regulatory risks that minimum standards are not met. Minimum immigration standards, minimum employment standards, minimum standards within any law that is specific and relevant for that particular interest. Okay? So that is regulatory risk. Want to manage that sucker. The other risk that I talk about is what we call labour market risk. So this is that risk that can eventuate, particularly if there's a large inflow of migrants, that could have a dampening effect in the labour market on wages and conditions, and reducing those incentives on employers to employ New Zealanders. So two kinds of risks we're managing, and we've set the system up to manage both kinds, but not to overmanage, to make sure that we're managing that in the right place, okay? So two kinds of risks, and in the system it means that we're going to have 3 checks or 3 gates. You guys, as employers, are applicants for 2 of those. You're an applicant for the employer gateway, the employer check. This is a check for us to make sure, largely, wholly to manage regulatory risk, that you're an employer that we want to let in the door, and that we think, yep, actually, clean bill of health, you can employ a migrant worker under here. Employer gateway, employer check. I'll talk more about it. The second is what we call the job gateway or the job check. This is a bit more about, this is where we're mainly managing that labour market risk. We want to check that job and make sure that there's no New Zealander available, the job is genuine and not some immigration rort, and that it's offering the kind of terms and conditions that are commensurate with New Zealand values and conditions that we have here. Job check. You're an applicant for the first two of those. Employer check, job check. Then we've got the migrant gateway. So this is where the migrant is the applicant. It's the last step in the check. This is the check for Immigration New Zealand to make sure that the person that you are bringing in has the right kind of health standard, no security issues, that type of thing. Very similar to what happens now. So that's my little map. Because I don't go in detail about some of this stuff, I do just want to draw your attention to what I've kind of put out the side. So on the left-hand side there, you'll see assurance and verification and arrows going across the system. So this is recognising that in the system, and particularly where we're taking out unnecessary processing, we need a sophisticated assurance and verification model for Immigration New Zealand. They're going to be working away in the background, okay, and kind of checking things. We might do some light checks up front. We obviously need to make sure that, things are hunky-dory. Really important part of this. The second that I've got on the right-hand side is something that's called Regional Skills Leadership Groups. I think we specialise in these long names, or RSLGs. This is something that has been established through the recent reforms the government announced to the vocational and education training system. Regional Skills Leadership Groups. They are groups that are being set up on a regional basis. They are putting an employer voice, understanding for that region what's the workforce, what's the labour sort of market plan for that region over the next little while? What kind of jobs do we need here? Okay, well, with that in mind, are we investing the right education? How are we going to bring in immigration into the mix? We're going to be feeding information into them, and they're going to be providing rich information to the immigration system about where we do need to import workers to fill the gaps. So that's a very important bit. Now, I realise that sort of kind is theoretical and a bit kind of up in the air. So I just want to take the opportunity to give you a bit of a feel about, given that you'll be customers for two of this checks, how's that going to work? So those of you who are accredited and support workers through this, you'll know there's this thing called the Employer Supplementary Form, paper-based. Believe it or not, it just gets PDF'd, so it means people like me, it's really hard to get information out of that and think about how to develop policy. Obviously, if we use that across the system would break. Quite frankly, system would break. That is not in Immigration New Zealand's interest, and it's obviously not in your interest. So part of the reason why this is 2021 is because there is an IT build that is being developed and will be rolled out absolutely to underpin this. Now, I'm not an IT specialist, but kind of donkey deep in the business case for this at the moment. That's looking a lot like being built off a CRM, Client Relationship Manager, management. So something like an online portal. So scrap all that paper-based stuff. We're talking about a system which you are directly able to put in your details, lodge stuff. You can update things. You don't need to come back to Immigration New Zealand or other government systems time after time saying, I've already provided this. That will hook into other systems as well. By using the New Zealand business number, we'll be able to draw information from other parts to do checks. This is the bit I'm pushing my colleagues on. I also think it should be able to kind of give you a bit of an update, or you should be able to check in about where an application might be at, because there's that black box. I've submitted this, I haven't heard about it. For Immigration New Zealand, it's a must-do because they need to understand you as employers. For that insurance and verification, they need to be looking at patterns, understanding, oh, actually something kind of looks a little bit weird here, so I might just direct a bit of activity rather than having to just scatter seeds in the wind and kind of make a guess, all right? So that's about how that's going to look and feel. Immigration New Zealand quite keen to road test that and sort of use employers as guinea pigs, so I know that they're getting that up and running. All right, so deep dives. Employer check, first gateway. What is this about? Remember what I mentioned earlier, managing regulatory risk predominantly. All right, so We have designed 3 different types of accreditation, which are sort of targeted to you, employers, as users of the system. All right, I'm going to talk to you about each in detail. But essentially, we're hitting off these main points, providing you with certainty as an employer about whether or not you can use the system, screening out the bad eggs. So strengthen standards, more weight on compliance, building a picture of an employer over time, creating that relationship with you, reducing the risk of exploitation, and making sure that Immigration New Zealand can put those resources around compliance into where it actually matters. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go through each of the 3 accreditation standards. The first one I'll kick off with is what we're calling standard accreditation. So this is about 22 to 25,000 employers that, to be honest, Immigration New Zealand has never directly kind of engaged with, unless maybe through a call centre or something like that. These guys here, employers in this group, they account for about 60%. On last year's stats, about 60% of these visas that are issued. Now, this employer accreditation is for you if you, as an employer, hire 5 or less employer-assisted temporary workers. Okay, we're not counting your working holiday schemers. We're not counting your RSE workers. We're not counting your partners of workers. We're not counting your students. Employer-assisted temporary work visa workers. Okay, so this is where what you can do over this next period of time is think, is that me? Is that not me? Am I 5? Am I less? What might you do in a 12-month period? Okay, if you're going to be doing 5 or less, this is you. And we're going to be focusing this on a light touch screen, okay? A light touch screen looking for regulatory risk. Let me give you a little bit of a feel about that. So what might those standards look like? So this is part of our continued build. We're doing more policy work. I've got colleagues in here who will be doing this. Policy work on really defining that, but we've got some good ideas. So I want to give you the feel of that, okay? First of all, when we think about an employer, we're going to check that they are a genuine business with a financial presence, i.e. they're not just some made-up kind of thing on paper, and there are a lot out there. Don't want those guys. And we are going to be looking at the key office holders, so proprietary owners, directors, those who have that day-to-day involvement and managing of the business. We want to look at them because we want to be asking you, and so imagine online portal, we're going to ask you a kind of series of questions that you sign up to. You're either yes or no. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that we're going to be asking you. Are any of those key office holders on the employer stand-down list? If the answer to that question is yes, you are screened out. If the answer is no, all good. Are those key office holders compliant with any relevant industry-specific or other regulatory standards? So I'm thinking, for example, like companies office law, etc. If they're non-compliant, sorry, screened out. If you are compliant, perfect. We love that. Do any of those key office holders have a history of non-compliance with the immigration system? Okay, so these kinds of things. Do any of them have convictions under the Immigration Act? Sorry, screened out. Have we found any of them to be providing false information to Immigration New Zealand? Sorry, if the answer is yes, we're screening you out. Have we ever found that you have employed unlawful workers? If yes, sorry, screened out. Have we ever found that you haven't paid the wages that you promised in a contract? Sorry, screened out. Light touch, employer portal, quick, updating information. So you kind of get the feel, right? Get the feel. Very different from the current policy, okay? Very different. We're also going to ask you to do something else, which is about sort of, again, in that flavour of reducing exploitation. Colleagues in Immigration New Zealand produce this beautiful, awesome material targeted to migrants about their employment rights. Tips for how to settle in New Zealand and kind of getting into the community. They produce it, it's glossy, it's beautiful, it's useful. We would like you to provide it to your migrant worker. Okay, so we're going to be asking that. You don't need to make it up. We've already done it. We just want you to get it out there, okay? This is what the standard accreditation looks and feels like, all right? Believe it or not, that will screen out employers. I doubt people in this room, but it does screen out employers. Now, you're probably thinking, all right, never had to do that before. How much is that going to cost? Well, look, we have been working through the modelling on fees, and we'll continue to do so as we get down into the processing side of things. But a word on fees. Immigration New Zealand, under our legislation, is not allowed to charge for anything other than what it costs to process something, okay? So we do quite a lot of modelling on how much of the time to take to do this and that, and then we kind of add it up. So cost recovery only, not seeking to make a profit, not cross-subsidising other kind of visa types, all right? So when we do that modelling, these are estimates, okay? We're looking at the standard of accreditation for an employer as an applicant costing in the range of about $550, $600, okay? That accreditation is going to last you 12 months, and then providing you've still got your clean bill of health, you re-accredited, it's going to last you 2 years. People say, why is it only 12 months to start off with? And that's because this is quite a light check, right? And we've never dealt with these employers before. We do actually want to come back in 12 months and make sure that, yes, indeed, they're not lying to us and things like that. So 12 months, then 2 years, you pay it then. Re-accreditation, easy. Have any of your details changed? Have you, by any chance, committed any of those offences? We'll obviously be using our systems to check that. That's standard accreditation, okay? Very different from the current system. That might not be you. When I asked that question about how many people you expect to employ on employer-assisted temporary work visas, you may have said, oh no, I have about 10 or 20 or more in a 12-month period. So we'd be looking to you to be what we're calling a high-volume employer, and you'd be applying for a high-volume accreditation. All right? This is made up of two different things. It's all of the regulatory risk stuff that I just talked about on the standard accreditation, but it's also doing a little bit of management on that labour market risk side of things as well, and I'll tell you about what that looks like. Okay, so you'll be doing everything I've already spoken about in terms of answering those questions. I hope that won't screen you out. But we will also ask you to make some commitments in two areas. The first area will be your commitment around training and upskilling New Zealanders, one. Your commitment about nudging and increasing and improving the wages and conditions of your jobs over time, okay? Now, one of the things that we heard overwhelmingly through consultation as I went out and talked to different industries is obviously employers are not one size fits all. You've got the small operations, you've got the massive ones, you've got the ones that have the huge HR departments. These commitments need to make sense for you as an employer, and for us, they need to set actually a reasonable standard of accreditation, something that is meaningful and that will make change. Otherwise, it is just processing for processing's sake, and we don't want any of that. So let me give you a little bit of a feel about what meeting those commitments or the things that you could commit to might look like, okay? These are examples. We're working it through further. We'll be talking to employer groups to kind of test and kick these ideas. All right. So me as an employer, how might I demonstrate my commitment to training and upskilling New Zealanders? Okay, so one of these things might be you, right? For example, it may be that you put your staff through work-relevant formal education that leads to an NZQA qualification. Might be you, might not be you. It might be that you have taken on an apprentice in the last 2 years. Might be you, might not be you. It might be that you actually provide a structured in-house training program like cadetships or management programs. Might be you, might not be you. It might be that you engage fully in industry and sector training schemes. It might be that you've got your own graduate or internship scheme or program. Or it might be that you demonstrate you spend a certain percentage of your payroll on the training of your staff. A meaningful commitment, but one that can fit with different kinds of employer circumstances, okay? This is what we're working through. That's on one side. How might you as an employer demonstrate your commitment to improving, increasing the wages and conditions of your jobs over time? Could be one of these things. It might be that when we look across your industry, and you're a part of an industry which has a representative body and does a survey of wages, it may be that you're paying above that, or you're moving to pay above that. It might be that you're a certified living employer, right? It may be looking at your payroll records over time and seeing how they're kind of shifting and changing. It might be that you're actually hardwired into a collective agreement that's been negotiated. And obviously that collective agreement will set out what wages will be over time. That's going to work. We're not going to replay that. You may not be part of a collective agreement. That's also okay. It may be that you show that you're increasing your wages in line with changes in the median wage over time. So we're working it through, but it's those kinds of things, recognising those different personalities of employers, but making it a meaningful commitment. Okay. So for you in this space, we're expecting, when we do our modelling, that accreditation around about kind of in the $800. So I'm talking about accreditation that's less than half of our current accreditation policy. It's a different policy. And people have said to me, Sian, why did you call it accreditation? The current policy is called accreditation. It's terribly confusing. And all I can say is this is a role for Immigration New Zealand to accredit you. So I've got to call it accreditation, but quite a different policy, okay? Now, there is a third type. Could be you. I couldn't see any labour hire firms in the room, I didn't think, but there may be. This accreditation at the moment is being called labour hire accreditation. Kind of does what it says on the tin, which is it's for labour hire companies, about 50 of these firms that we expect. But really, at its heart is a recognition that there are some kinds of business models that when we look deeply at them, kind of have potential risks in a way that others don't around exploitation. So tend to have an arm's length relationship between the employee and the employer. And in those situations, that's where vulnerabilities present themselves. So this accreditation model is about taking all of that standard check that I mentioned. It's also about taking the high volume stuff, but we will do a few more checks around that regulatory risk. Stuff that we don't think we need to do for all firms, but things that we do need to do for firms of this type. So labour hire at the moment, but we've got an open mind, potentially franchising models, for example. Sometimes we see that come out as well. So what we'll be looking at, for example, is that firms in this camp will need to demonstrate that they have a history of contracts for the supply of labour that includes New Zealanders, i.e. they're not solely set up just to wash migrant workers through. We're going to check that. We're also looking to make sure that they only contract their migrant labour out to employers who are compliant with minimum standards. Okay? And we're going to make sure as well and look to see that they have good systems in place to monitor employment and safety conditions on site for where we're putting people. So this accreditation, when we do the costing of that, you're probably looking in the realm of $1,000. More checks need to be done, so that's a bit more cost. Also in here, Immigration New Zealand will do some more on-site verification. So at times, they will also be going out and checking conditions on site as well. Okay. Deep dive. Whew, how are you going? So that was my deep dive on accreditation. You guys are the applicant for that. If you get the clean bill of health, you'll be looking for a job check at some stage. So this is where you have a vacancy that pops up and you're looking for any New Zealand workers, looking perhaps to hire a migrant worker in. Now this has been re-geared to bring in that recognition of industry and sector difference, to also bring in recognition of differences in regions, particularly difference in regional labour markets and the supply of New Zealand workers in there, okay? So we're going to deliver recognition that labour markets can differ in regions. Make sure that when we do those checks with MSD for workers that we're getting a much better matching out of that. Getting employer regional voice in, reducing complexity, all of that good stuff. Now, I'm going to take you through the options for the job check, okay? It might be that the job you are trying to fill is a highly paid job. Highly paid being defined as 2 times the median wage. So currently that's about in the 104, 106%. to be honest, with jobs of this type, we want you to come in and we want you to come in fast, okay? We're making it easy. This is a very targeted type of job check. When we look at the data for last year, this is about 1,200 types of roles, of visas that were issued. So quite small in the scheme of the 52-odd thousand that we did, but we want to make it fast for you guys, okay? Offering these jobs. Okay, so how does that work? Well, essentially, we're going to check that the job is not fake. We'll always do that. And then we're going to check that, yes, that is the salary of the job. And then other than that, we're going to go, right, you've passed the job check. Quick, right? Easy test. So, again, when I look at the data, these are things like occupations, resident medical officer, GP, software engineer, psychiatrist, construction project manager. When we look at our data, those are the kinds of jobs, occupations that tend to hit that salary threshold. This is where the work to residence policy will sit, all right? Completely uncoupled from the accreditation that you as an employer hold, all about the migrant, and to be frank about what they're earning. They have a pathway to residence. Coming in 2021. Until then, the existing policy stands that I talked about earlier. Okay. That might not be you, obviously. You might not be one of those 1,200. So if that's not you, you'll ask the question, is this job I am hiring for part of a sector agreement? I call this a kind of new feature of the immigration system, but really it's sort of like an evolution of the recognised seasonal employer scheme. This is the opportunity for both government and industry to sit down on the table, targeted towards industries which are high users of predominantly lower paid jobs, okay? The opportunity for the government to do a one-to-many, instead of doing all of that stuff around labour market, kind of checking one-to-one, death by 1,000 cuts, because these are the guys that we do over and over again, sitting down, coming to an agreement, one-to-many, embedding the labour market test, all right? Setting up front what it is that you need to meet, and then once you demonstrate that part of a sector agreement, a quick check through Immigration New Zealand. Okay, so what are the sectors? Can I have my sector in, please? So essentially, where government has asked us to start is those sectors with a high reliance, high usage of lower paid roles. There are a number of sectors. And government has asked us to take forward those negotiations with 2 sectors this year, looking to conclude those negotiations by about mid-next year, then take on another 2. We're going to be in a position, a whole new team, a little offshoot of my team's been set up to negotiate 2 of these a year. We're starting off with aged residential care, and we're starting off with meat processing. Hey, Chris. I'm sitting down talking with Chris at the moment. Essentially, what we'll be looking down to talk about is, what are your longer term plans? Yes, you use migrant labour now, you use it in, high density. How's that going to unfold or change over time? Looking at the relative shares of New Zealanders and migrants in that particular sector, is there opportunity? What kind of commitments might we get from you around changing that over time? Okay. Other sectors that we'll be looking to talk to, we've started conversations: dairy, forestry, road freight transport, tourism, hospitality. I was talking yesterday down in Invercargill, my first time in Invercargill, someone from tulip growing. They said, can we have a sector agreement? And I was kind of saying, well, actually, frankly, you're probably not who we're looking to do, because we really are looking to target this to high users of migrant labour. So that is why we're focusing on that point. Construction and horticulture, viticulture sectors, also potential candidates as well. The thing that you need to know is that if you are one of those sectors, jobs in that, and that occupation is part of the agreement, so sat down and agreed that it's going to be this occupation, and that occupation, if the job you're looking to fill is one of those occupations, you'll be subject to that sector agreement, all right? So the conversations that we're having at the moment, sitting down the preparation phase, is what will be the scope? Which occupations will we have? Talking to meat processing, talking to aged residential care. How will you have the representation and the mandate of your industry given that coverage? If things like this aren't met, we're not going to be able to go forward in negotiations. We're going to need to work through that, okay? So we started off with those 2 sectors because actually, to be honest, they're a bit easier to start off with. And then we were working through to our harder, kind of a bit more things to put together with tourism and hospitality, etc. later. Okay, that might not be you. You might not be highly paid. You might not be part of a sector agreement. If that's the case, then the thing for you is the regionalised labour market test. Regionalised because we're going to differentiate according to where you're based. We're also going to look at what your job is paying and differentiate according to pay as well. Let me take you through this. Now, the first thing that's quite helpful for me to say, I think, is quite often I use this jargony term labour market test, and I just check that people know what I mean by that. Labour market test is made up of three things. The first thing always happens. Immigration New Zealand, regardless, will always check that your job is not fake, that it's genuine, okay? What sometimes happens is that you, as an employer, need to have your advertising checked by Immigration New Zealand, need to check that you've done advertising, sometimes. The third thing that sometimes happens is that you do a check with MSD to see if they've got a job seeker on their books. Now, depending on where you sit, you'll have all three of those, or you only have one, or you only have two. I'm going to set out when that's going to happen. All right, but first, the regions. What are the regions? So this is our map of New Zealand. We have 16 regions. We are using the regional authorities for this. This is an effort for government to use the same definition of regions because we realised MSD used one definition, education used one definition, trying to bring that together and make it kind of common. And when we looked at that question, what are the different labour markets in operation? How do we regionalise? We saw that there are three different kinds of labour markets that can be operating in New Zealand at any one point in time. There is what happens in cities. Wellington's a city. Sorry, Invercargill, you weren't a city. Tauranga, you're not a city. Auckland, Christchurch, Wellington, Hamilton, and Dunedin are our cities. So what happens in cities? What happens in cities is that we do see shortages. So in Auckland, when I look at the data, shortages left, right and centre. But in cities, there's often a real flow in and out of labour, quite a churn. So things like advertising, for example, really play an important role in providing a signal about what jobs are available. That's what cities tend to look like. Then there's what we call higher labour supply regions. This is when we look at indicators of unemployment in that region, of underutilisation, so people who would work more if they could. When we look to see about numbers coming out of our schooling system, they are higher labour supply. There is untapped workers there who could be brought into jobs. And currently, on our set of indicators, these are the regions that fall into that space. Then there are lower labour supply regions, and to be honest, there's just no one there. When we look at unemployment and we look at underutilisation, not a sausage. And so if we're thinking about processing, why would we do all these checks when we know there's no one there? So you'll see what happens for them. Okay, that's our regions. We have a whiz-bang model that sits underneath this, quite proud of that. We'll be looking to refresh that probably about every year because labour markets are dynamic, they change. I don't want global financial crises, but they do change over time, so we will need to look at this and see where the regions do kind of switch points. That'll be well signalled to you if it is the case. Okay, regional skills leadership groups, I did mention this before. They're also being set up on those regions. There are some great groups already out there, and we're just going to be looking to see, do they have local employers, unions, iwi, community groups, taking a shared view across all of those stakeholders about what their region's needs are in the labour market, what are the barriers, and taking a more coordinated approach to be demanding out of the immigration system, but also demanding out of the education and welfare system, and more responsive, align into central government. We've been talking to people about that. Okay. This is like the mother of all tables, so bear with me. This is in your booklets. I'm going to take you through that in detail. This is where the regional picture and the what your job pays comes together to tell you the type of labour market test that you'll need to do and what kind of visa, duration, stand-down period, etc. will unfold from that. Okay, so bear with me while I take you through it. So what I've got running across the top is that type of labour market. So I've got cities, highest labour supply regions, lower labour supply regions. Down the side, I've got does your job pay either above the median or below the median? You still need to pay the market rate. If you've got a GP, you cannot pay them $25.50 an hour, okay? That's not real. All right, so you still need to pay the market rate. Let me take you through that very top line, okay? Right, so these are jobs that pay above the median. These are the jobs that over time, likely to have a pathway to residence. SMC, starting to earn in the right sort of space, right? Okay, so we distinguish those jobs. Above the median, I'm going to start with my two regional labour markets there. We are saying if you are in the regions and your job is paying above the median, we are going to make it easy. The only thing that we will do, more facilitative, is check that your job is not fake, all right? Also just check the salary and stuff like that. If you meet that test, then you get a tick through the job check, all right? Get a tick through the job check, your worker will have a 3-year visa, up to 3 years, renewable, no stand-down period for them. More facilitative. In the regions, we want to get these higher paid people into those jobs in the regions. These settings is about making that easier, okay? The picture's a little bit different if you're in a city. So in a city, I mentioned constant in, out, this is the only place where we will have skills shortages lists, okay? If the job is on the skills shortages list, you won't need to advertise. We will always check that your job is genuine and not fake, okay? If it's on the list, you won't advertise. If it's not on the list, we will check your advertising. You will need to advertise with the pay, okay? Good signals to the labour market. That's what's going to happen in there. If you get a tick through that, check, job is not fake, job is real, advertising has occurred, yes, pay rate, tick, tick. Your people also, 3-year visa, renewable, all right? So those are the jobs that are paid above the median. What if your job is paid below the median? Okay, so let me take you down to the bottom line. Again, I'm going to talk about what the strengthened labour market test means in a minute, so just kind of hold that thought. If you are in a lower labour supply region, we have already established that no one lives where you are and there isn't that much space in the labour market. We will issue your visa for 3 years up front, okay? We don't see the need to check 2 times through the 3 years and put you through that processing because we already know that there's no one there, okay? 3 years up front followed by the stand-down period, okay? If you're in a higher labour supply region, that is telling us that, yeah, potentially there could be people there in the near future, right? So status quo essentially, you get up to 3, you get a 12-month visa, ability to renew twice, so 3 years in total, and then that's followed by the stand-down period. Now, if you're in the city, it's exactly the same thing as well. So in this, really recognising that in those low labour supply regions, shortages are definitely existing, but jobs that pay below stand-up period will apply, but get them the 3-year visa up front. Okay, I just still want to talk a little bit about the strengthened labour market test because that's even more jargon from me. Okay, so remember I said earlier, strengthened labour market test can be 3 things. Check that the job is not fake, always do that. Whether advertising is required, a check with MSD. Strengthened labour market test, all of those 3 things need to be done, okay? Right, so advertising with the pay, please. Going to check that. Now, the check with MSD, we know that this has not been working well. MSD know this, employers know this, immigration knows this. How do we improve that? Where do we make that check make sense and make a difference? This is how we think we do that. First of all, we are going to be asking for you to please document your job well. Tell us what qualifications, what skills, what experience are needed for that job. Tell that to MSD, okay? They'll get a good picture of what your job needs. They will then triage, all right, and this was part of their IT build. They will know on a regional or sectoral basis whether or not they've got people who could fill that job. You know, if you look in some of the regions, they already know, nah, we ain't got anyone. So, for example, down in Queenstown, for a number of years, they've had a triage route where they know in Queenstown there ain't no one to fill any jobs. So they actually whiz them through that kind of check. MSD triage. IT build to enable that. That might be on a job basis as well. Because, for example, we do know that some early in career teachers, some early in career nurses end up earning below the median and then they move up. So we want to make it quick triage. They know they haven't got people on the jobs, on the books to do that. Whiz them through. Okay. If they find that they do potentially have someone for that. They'll be working with you to determine whether one of their job seekers is suitable, trainable, available for that job, okay? And whether to make a referral or not. If they do make a referral, we're going to have quite a tight number of reasons where that referral could be declined, okay? Things like, this person didn't turn up to the interview. Right, you've done what you needed to do. Reasons that this person did test positive for a drug test and the job that I'm doing is in a high-risk environment, okay? Right, obviously decline that person. But quite a tight number of reasons. This is, again, one of the things that working together with MSD colleagues, we're going to be developing this. All right, then they will tell Immigration New Zealand, they'll say, we referred someone, didn't meet the reasons for declining, so job check can't be met, sorry, Immigration New Zealand. Immigration New Zealand, we are fettering their ability to overturn what MSD is saying, okay? Putting incentives on MSD to make really good referrals, all right? To triage out the ones that we know are not going to work. MSD will absolutely recognise if you've been working with them in the past. So potentially, you know, over the past year or a couple of years, you have been bringing in referrals. You've probably got as many as you can take because they need support, right? They'll recognise that and so go, okay, actually you've met the job check because you've been doing the things that we want to do, which is kind of making sure that you're making those jobs available. They will recognise that. They'll also recognise if you're hiring 10 people at once for this job, you probably can't take all 10 MSD referrals because it requires a bit more work. Maybe you can take 1 or 2, all right? You'll agree that with them. Fine. All right. Now, a job check. So you are the applicant for this. You're going to have to pay a fee for that, all right? When we've done our modelling, we're seeing that to be around about the kind of 550 mark. Now, I get a lot of questions. I've got 10 jobs at once. Is that 10 times 550? All right. Let's think about the processing. 10 of the same jobs, essentially the same check. You're in one labour market. It's all the same occupation, it's the same job. You'd only pay that once. A job check is also likely, we're going to finally make our decision on this, likely to last for about 6 months. So you'll have an approval to recruit into that for 6 months. So again, yeah, multiple roles. We're looking at how do you make that kind of one check where it makes sense. Clearly, if one of your job is in a higher labour supply region and one's in a lower labour supply region, the processing is a little bit different. Okay, so we will need to recognise that, but kind of generally be a one job check. What does that mean in terms of I love this example from down in Queenstown, a restaurant operator who's got 2 restaurants on the same street. Often moves people from restaurant to restaurant. Some of you guys move your people around the country and stuff like that. This will make it easier because we've already checked you as an employer. We've already done a check on the job. Is the job in a materially different place where there's a different labour market? If the answer is no, then move that person. That's fine. So things like that, it opens up those possibilities to achieve that. All right, I'll just talk about the stand down. People are really conscious that August 2020, stand down does come in effect because 3 years since 2017. Government has decided to keep that policy in place, but asked us to consult on are there any other ways that we could meet the policy objective. So the objective being here about preventing a build-up of people on temporary visas who have no pathway to residence, puts them potentially in a place of vulnerability. And essentially 2 things came back to us. One was a pathway to residence for lower paid people. And the government said, actually, we don't have an appetite for that. It's quite a ration place in our residence setting. We'd prefer to set that aside for higher paid qualified people. The other thing that came back was, well, I'm a good employer, I promise you. So if you bond them to me, I will look after them. No appetite for that either because, not all employers are the same. So stand down period remains in place. Right, worker check, pretty much the same as what we do. I'm not going to talk much about this. Migrant will pay for this. That's their application to make. This is a bit cheaper for them because they've been paying for the other things. All right, so I'm getting to the end. You're doing well. Phased approach of the changes, more information. and other things that we're consulting about that you can ask me questions on, of course. Right. Are you still alive?
So you've all got that? Very good. So we've got some time for some questions now. We have got that online audience that we need to be conscious of. So we'll need you to talk into the microphone if you do have a question, and we'll also be taking questions from the online audience if we think will be relevant to the wider group. So who's got some questions? The good news, I think, too, isn't it, is that this is not something that you need to digest immediately.
Yeah.
It's all been phased over the next sort of 18 or so months. Yes, there's immediate change to the talent visa number that's in effect, but other than that, phased in through 2020, 2021, so nothing to really panic about. Any questions that you'd like to respond? Oh, sorry, we need you to talk into the microphone.
Did I hear you earlier that you're going to establish a talent accreditation pathway or something like that?
Yeah, so in 2021, when everything is phased in, those 6 different kind of visa policies I talked about, that is when they will be disestablished, they will cease to exist, and we'll have this one new visa that will come out. Oh. So if you currently are an accredited employer and you're doing that, that is when that will finish. Oh, right? Yes, yeah. But you have up until that point. And that is why, we needed to actually raise that salary threshold now, because you can imagine the incentives in place in terms of like, I better get in before it becomes 104,000. Completely rational behaviour, but one that we wanted to avoid. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I'll take that side.
Question.
Yeah, hey, how proactive or reactive do you think the program will be with respect to projects such as Transmission Gully in certain regions?
What a very good question. So tell me a bit more about kind of what you're thinking there. Sorry. So you're thinking about actually, we have these circumstances, events that happen that we need to get people in and fast. And I guess that very much is about, kind of employers coming together with Immigration New Zealand and say, hey, we've got this thing planned out. So planning out, do you want to start a job check? You know that you're going to be needing to employ this group of people, so maybe you bring that in. That job check probably going to last about 6 months, so if people move or, you expect to have someone in and that falls through, you won't need to go through all of that again. You've got your job check. So it's actually giving you certainty as an employer that at the end of the day, you are going to be able to fill that with a migrant worker. Sometimes I think for some employers it's a bit like a throw of the dice, but I think, and particularly when I think about sector agreements and sitting down with an industry, thinking about what is coming up on the horizon. Yeah.
Just a question in relation to the work to residency you mentioned for going to be under the high-paying jobs in the future. Is there any thought or move to change the age in that respect?
Yes. So I've had this question before. Interesting. I don't have the answer for you right now. The answer I can give you is that government hasn't asked us to change any settings within the residence policies at the moment, but I'm aware of that difference. That being 55 and it also being 55, that could be something that's looked at potentially. So that hasn't been decided yet. It might be something that we look at. Obviously, that will be for the minister to determine of, no, Sian, leave that alone, not interested. But it's interesting because this has been raised, so I think quite interested in providing some advice around it. Yeah.
Louise, we'll just do a question here and then we'll go to you.
Sorry, around, so if you've got the visa, everything's gone through, the process has worked, we've, as a company, got our visa, you said you have it for 12 months and then you renew it and then you can get it for 2 years.
Hang on, sorry. Right, so tell me about you and where you're at.
We would be the highly paid IT sector.
Oh, so you're...
So I've applied for the visa, right? This is hypothetical.
Yep, so you've been accredited, you've got approval for your job check, you've found your person. What kind of visa do they have?
The highly skilled.
Yep, so you'll definitely be you will be in the above median income.
Yes, so my question is just you have the visa as an employer for 12 months, right? And then you have to renew it. And you
You're
have
talking
it for
about the accreditation?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, sorry, right.
Sorry,
so accreditation,
accreditation,
yes,
sorry.
yeah.
So I'm just trying to work out how long, because you've got in here up to 3-year visa renewable.
So visa that's issued to the migrant is different from an accreditation that you hold. Accreditation is like the tick that you have as an employer. And what we're saying for all types is you initially will get that for 12 months and then you can renew for another 2 years. The exception to this is labour hire companies. Okay. Now, if you are already an accredited employer, we are really thinking through how do we streamline you into this accreditation? How do we recognise that? Because we've already got a whole lot of information about you, right? So you'll hold the accreditation for that long. You'll need to hold that accreditation in order to be able to hire and keep these migrants. So you've got to keep that ticking, but that is separate from the visa and the length of the visa. So in your case with your IT roles, sounds like 3 years renewable, and potentially if they're paid over that 200% of the median wage, they'll have a pathway to residence that is bespoke to them. Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, hi, sir.
So my question was on the same table, where if a migrant is earning above the median wage,
Yep.
just clarifying, there's no stand-on period there.
Correct. Yes. Stand down period only applies for jobs paying below the median.
Okay, and a
Yes.
follow-up question to that. So currently, in today's scenario, where the work to resident has been increased to 79K, the people who are on work visas, even above the median wage right now, will still have to go back home if they complete 3 years, because this comes into picture only in 21.
Yes, so we've been crafty with our implementation timeframe. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, here. So the first stand down stuff happens in August 2020. That's 3 years from August 2017. We will be getting rid of ANSCO and moving to that above or below the median in July. So before stand down. So there is an opportunity. You as an employers, if you're like, I want to keep this person, I am willing to push their wages up.
Oh, great.
That would be a good outcome in terms of sort of what the government's looking for. And so time to do that ahead. You know, obviously that's a business choice for you. We're just making it really clear, you know, above, below the median, what the situation is. Clear for the migrants as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Your question?
Hi. So if you've got an employee, who's currently on the talent visa
Yes.
around the 55,000.
Yes, same
thing.
continues for them.
So there used to be a pathway that they could, after 2 years, apply for a talent residence visa.
Still
Well,
applies for them, yeah.
So nothing changes if
No.
they currently got the
Fine.
talent.
As long
work
as they were
visa.
on that visa before the 7th of October,
Yeah.
the 55,000 applies for them. So generally when we do this thing called grandparenting,
Yeah.
it's the conditions that you know, the rules that you applied in the time.
Okay.
If this person has come in after the 7th of October, then that 79,000 odd is what applies
It
for
was
them.
prior, but I'm just working out the path to residency for that person still applies.
Yeah, so they'll continue to hold the visa that they've got.
Yeah, for
Providing
3
that they
years.
still meet that 55,000 and above income.
Yeah.
After the 2 years, they apply for residency, and if those conditions are met, they will get their residency.
And just out of interest, if they, prior to having the talent visa,
Yep.
had other work visas and worked in New Zealand for several years even before that, could they apply for the residence visa earlier than the 2 years, or do they have to wait?
No, so they'd be under that particular policy. I mean, they've got the option at any time to look over the way and look at skilled migrant category and decide whether or not actually I'm in a position where I am going to collect the points and stuff for that,
Yeah.
or they stay where they're at. So they have that choice, but you can't speed up the two
Okay.
years. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank
Yeah.
you.
Hi, just a question around the median wage. Is that a gross amount or is that a net? Where does that figure sit?
Yes,
Does it
so
plays?
that is a gross amount. And I love the median wage. So national median wage indexed over time, we are not going to find ourselves in the position that we were with the 55,000 threshold. So, you know, Immigration New Zealand is an information taker. They already, every November, look to see what Stats New Zealand say, so that does change, and that's why, Dean, I think you mentioned it's gone from 25 to 25.50. That's a kind of yearly thing, phased in. It is occupation agnostic. So what I mean by that is we're not differentiating between what the median is for different occupations. National median. Half of New Zealand earn above it and half earn below it. Just going in the middle. Thank you.
Sian, over here.
Oh, sorry.
Hi. I work for an industry where we have trouble getting New Zealand residents to work for us. When we bring immigrants in, we don't pay, well, currently we don't certainly pay over that threshold, and the work they do, they wouldn't be getting that. So what is the visa that they...
So tell me about, if I can, sort of where you think you'd be at. When you say threshold, do you mean the median wage?
Yeah, so the 79,000K, they...
Okay.
Yeah. So currently they would...
Yeah. So 79,000 only applies if you're accredited and they're on that work to residence. So that policy will be disestablished from 2021, okay?
Yeah.
So if they're not earning that, they wouldn't be able to have that work to residence. Essentially, then they would be in the space of the below median place. So where is your job?
I work for scaffolding firm.
Oh, all over the country?
No, just in Porirua.
All right, so you're in one of our cities. So essentially the status quo, the kind of visa that's currently on offer now. So they would have a 12-month visa that can be renewed a couple of times up to 36 months, followed by the stand-down period.
Right.
Although if that wage ticks over the median, so currently if it went, you're paying above 25.50, ba-boom, ba-boom, you're up in the above median wage place, okay? It means that we would just need, because you're in a city, you need to check your advertising, 3 years renewable, all right? Obviously, completely up to you about how you set your wages and what you want to do.
So potentially they can only stay in the country for 3 years, and then if we don't increase their wages, they go home.
Yes. So that is that policy setting. Temporary means temporary. Above median wage, we're looking at, tends to be jobs, occupations pay that do have a pathway to residency and looking at over time. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Sorry, can I just mention one thing? So getting rid of ANSCO for this temporary work visas that I've talked to you about, ANSCO does still exist in the skilled migrant category in the residence policies. I think we might, we'll see how these link up, but yeah. So I realise that could be a bit disjointed, but...
Hi. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Very good presentation. Just a quick, I've got 2 questions while I have the mic. I'm in the aged residential care sector, so really interested in the sector agreement. First question, how does this change, so I'm assuming it's going to change the essential skills work visa?
Yes, so essential skills is one of those 6 things that I talked about. So coming up with a new name for that, it's quite a hot topic in my office at the moment. In 2021, essential skills, dead. Yeah.
So, which means that all employers will need to be accredited if we want to employ migrant workers.
Correct.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Can I add one thing to that? Sorry. A lot of people are asking me, I'm not currently accredited. Is that a good idea? Should I do this? Well, you need to be thinking, what kind of employer are you going to be? The policy is very different, so you need to make a choice because the way that we do accredited employer, quite time-consuming, intensive, costs quite a bit more, so you need to make that choice yourself just in case you are not an accredited employer already about whether that's wise. So, thank
you. And, the second question is, I'm happy that we're proposing reinstatement of lower skilled workers to bring in their family, and you said they could come on a visitor or a student visa. Is that right?
That's right.
What's the time frame of the visa that you're looking at?
Okay, so the difference there, so this is something that will come in from July, we'll reinstate that. Student visa will be issued as long as the worker, the supporting worker visa will be issued. Similarly with the visitor visa. So interestingly, with visitor visas, Immigration New Zealand tend to only issue those for up to 9 months. Otherwise, you're kind of not a visitor because you expect to go home. They will issue those up for a year, so that will match the worker's visa, which means you don't have to go home after 9 months and then come back and get another visa. They'll issue for as long as that. If that person wants to work, no problem. They'll just need to go through the job check and do.
Right. And the visitor visa is also automatically renewable then? Because then the worker can
So it'll
renew.
match what it is. I mean, obviously they need to meet the standards for that visa and security checks and things like that. But if that's fine, yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Just a couple of questions on accreditation too. I guess the standard accreditation, have you got any idea of a timetable? When 22,000 people is a hell of a lot of businesses.
I know. This is consuming our thinking and planning, hence why it's not something we're doing until 2021. Zero expectation all employers will be accredited from day one. That will break our system and that will break you as employers. So no intentions to do that. I mentioned earlier about thinking about our current cohort of accredited employers, how we streamline them, and I'm having also conversations with regions who are saying to me, please don't make us do it over this time because this is when we're busy picking our grapes. So we actually need to sit down and go through what does a sensible transition plan. As soon as we have done that, talk to people about it, it's got the tick off, we will tell people, you will know in advance. It is very much in Immigration New Zealand's interest to have that go smoothly, obviously, as it is for employers. Yeah.
And I guess the second part of that accreditation is how do you view, say, one company who might have multiple businesses in multiple locations? Can that head office, if you like, be the accredited employer?
On behalf of their sort of offspring, if you like. Again, kind of working through there, but really what we're looking at as we develop that and have an answer for that question, essentially the policy intent behind it is we're really looking to accredit the body that has the most direct employment relationship with the people, if that kind of makes sense. So we'd be looking and thinking, okay, well, some head office that's way off on the other side of the world, it kind of doesn't make sense to necessarily accredit them. So we'll be looking through, but that gives you the kind of sense of, because it's about managing regulatory risk, exploitation risk, we're interested in going, okay, who are the people that actually have that direct thing with? Lots of firms like yours that have that relationship. So that's something that we're working through, the things I don't have the exact answer right now.
Hi, I'm Peter. This is not a question. This is a quick comment, if you don't mind. I came here because I believe this is a talk on policy and resetting, and there's a lot of details, which is all very good. But I think it's an eye-opener to hear you say that that you think the customer isn't necessarily the migrant, but the employer. So I think that's a very important shift in thinking, and I believe that in so doing, what followed, the details you followed, I'm afraid still seem to emphasize on the importance of the migrant, and the giveaway are quite evident. We talk about exploitation, unequal playing field, bad apples, so. My comment is that the employers seem to be getting quite a sort of a bad look from your lenses, and I think this needs to change if we are going to reset the policy.
Yeah. Yep. So I suppose our comment back would be absolutely not all employers are the bad eggs or the bad apples. So but some are. Currently, our system is not able or has a lot of difficulty in identifying that and taking action. So how can we think about a system which absolutely recognises those who are not and lets them in, and screens the ones that aren't? And so I'm sorry if you took away that I think all employers are bad. I definitely don't think that. But through things like the employer check, a light touch check for the vast majority of employers to screen out, on some clear set of standards, but to not make it an overburdensome thing. I think And it's interesting the contrast with the proposals that were consulted on, which put a lot more in that standard check. And to be honest, the feedback that we had and when we looked at it is it's over-checking because the vast majority of employers aren't these bad eggs. So how do we do those checks in a way that does identify them but doesn't kind of penalise or put too much compliance on the rest as well? So I thank you for the opportunity to maybe just restate I don't think that at all and to kind of say how this in effect. Probably, actually on this stuff, probably when we did the consultation where we went out across the country. But absolutely, I mean, you've hit on an important thing. This is the first of a conversation. Talking with my colleagues over the next 18 months, how do we get information out to you guys, when we've got the new information coming through? So we are thinking a lot about that in a way that works for you, but is obviously also efficient for us. Because as much as I like to travel the country, I've got to do some of the development of this stuff. But thanks for that reminder. It's good.
Hello.
We're going to have to wrap it up. We're on time. So what we'll do is we'll hang around if we can afterwards and answer any other questions. But I think we've pretty much done our time. So thank you so much for coming along. We know there's a lot to take in, but as we said, it's going to be spread over quite a time period. But if you have any questions, please come down and we'll deal with them personally. Thank you.
You did really well.
That's the benefit of doing it on the trot for several times.
Yeah.
Hi. Oh, yes.